This is the KTM 390 Duke, new and updated for 2024, and basically one of the most performance-orientated, A2-friendly, learner-legal bikes that you can currently buy. This, on the other hand, is the 990 Duke, over twice the power and over twice the price, and in my experience, a bit of a weapon. This though, well, this is the proper beast, the 1390 Super Duke R Evo, and it's basically the most premium bike in the entire KTM lineup. But look, which one's the best road bike, and is spending more money and getting more power always worth it? Well, in this video, I'm going to take one for the team and ride them all back to back to find out. But before we get started, a huge thanks to DJI for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. For all the riding footage, we're using their Action 4 cameras, which are a brilliant choice for capturing and sharing your motorcycle rides. Firstly, they're super compact and light, which means they don't feel too weighty when mounted on your lid. The field of view is nice and wide, which allows you to get plenty in the shot. There's one of the biggest sensors on the action camera market to ensure you get the best possible image quality. And on top of all that, the stabilisation is as good as it gets, so your footage is always going to look nice and smooth. So a huge thanks to DJI again for their support. And you can find out more about the Action 4 through the links down in the description. So look, let's start with the 390 Duke and sort of work our way up to the more bonkers end of the spectrum. And this one, as you might have gathered, is powered by a 390 engine. It's a single cylinder, liquid cooled, and it makes about 45 horsepower peak and 14 newton meters of peak torque. That's pretty much the maximum you can go for an A2 compliant bike, but the rest of the spec is really quite sporty and elevates it above a lot of the bikes in that part of the market. You've got suspension from their in-house WP brand with an upside down fork and adjustability, which you don't always see at this sort of price point. A radial front brake caliper from Bybre, which is a more affordable sub-brand of Brembo. The styling package looks the nuts as well. It looks every bit the baby Super Duke, and also you get a really impressive suite of electronics with a TFT display, good switchgear, a bunch of riding modes, and lots of settings and phone connectivity and good stuff like that. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to riding this one. You know, the thing I really love about bikes like this is that you can properly rev them out even on the road. 45 horsepower might not sound like a great deal, but you really can use all of it and get it right up to 8,000 or 9,000 RPM. And there is just something really satisfying about that with smaller bikes. It feels like you're not the limitation, it's the bike, and you can't always say that for the big, super powerful super nakeds. Now, the other thing this bike has massively in its favour is the weight. It's about 154 kilograms, fully fueled up, and so that means it's just so easy to ride, so nimble, so flickable, so agile. And so on the one hand, that's great for newer riders who don't want something too big and too intimidating, but even if you're a bit more experienced, you know, it's a joy. Great on the brakes as well, good suspension, good ride quality, and although you can tell it is a slightly smaller than average bike, there's not a great deal of reach to it, it feels quite sat up, you know, it still has that KTM-ness, the slick quick shifter, the reviness, the immediacy on the throttle, the great handling, and so it's worthy, absolutely, of the Duke name. Now clearly, with this bike being the lowest price of the bunch, I'll have to give it 5 stars for affordability. It is the lowest on power though, and so we'll give it 1 star there. And for the looks, although for a learner it is quite impressive, it just doesn't quite have the presence of the other two, and so I'll give it 2. As for the overall fun factor and enjoyment of riding, well honestly, for the road and the way that you can just pin the throttle everywhere you go, plus the great handling, I'll have to go for a 4. Next up, the 990 Duke, and it may look, to the untrained eye, somewhat similar to the 390, but this is a completely different kettle of fish. It used to be the 890, it's gone up in capacity to a 990, and now you get 123 horsepower peak and 103 newton meters of peak torque, and it really does have a lot of mid-range shove. The downside, I guess, versus a smaller bike like the 390 is this is about 40 kilograms heavier, but given that it's over twice the power, you really do have a massively superior sort of power to weight ratio. Tech-wise, it's not that dissimilar. There are just more settings and more rider aids. Looks-wise, it's not massively different either, but the chassis spec is a little cut above, with a pair of 4-piston radially mounted KTM brake calipers up front, Bridgestone's S22 tyres, which I think are really good for a bike like this, and again, the WP suspension, full adjustability and all that good stuff. This one is almost certainly going to be more fun. As soon as you get on this bike, you'll notice it's a bit more sporty, it's longer in the riding position, you feel a touch more stretched out. Actually, to be honest, to me, it feels more natural and just, of course, like a proper big bike. I love the way this engine sounds, this parallel twin. You've got these little crackles when you come off the gas. I don't know if you can really hear those from my helmet mic, but it sounds fantastic. So yeah, not only do you get that huge step up in power, and this bike is, you know, properly quick, but also the character that you get from a twin over the single, which is just a little bit less soul stirring. Now, of course, there is that extra weight that we talked about, and if you were trying to pick your way through city traffic and wanted the smallest needle to thread through, then the 390 Duke is going to do that job a little bit better. But I will still say this doesn't feel like a massive bike. It feels manageable, it feels light enough, and probably in the sweet spot for road riding. In fact, I'm going to say this is right up there with the best of the best naked bikes for me. And it is a little bit expensive versus obviously the 390 Duke, but also versus some of the immediate competition. But it's very, 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 very good. Now, this bike is a little pricey versus the competition, so I'll go 3 stars for affordability and 3 stars for power as well, because it's somewhere in the middle of the other two. Looks-wise, I know this new headlight is a bit divisive, but for me it's better than the previous generation, and it has more of that Super Duke look about it because they've made it look butcher. So I think I'll go 4 stars there, and while it might not have got the maximum score in any specific discipline there, for me, on the road, it's the total package in terms of fun. So, Super Duke time, 1390, a big step up. It's a 75-degree V-twin, 187 horsepower peak, and 145 newton meters of peak torque, so it really does pack a punch. And given that this bike is close to 20 grand, you can see the chassis spec is worthy of that sort of price point. Brembo style brake calipers up front, which are pretty much the best you can get, and the latest and greatest from WP in terms of their semi-active electronically adjustable suspension. So not only can you adjust it through the switchgear and dash with a bunch of different settings, but also it's going to constantly adapt to the current riding style and conditions to give you the best possible damping. Also, it's got automatic preload, so it's going to get the bike level no matter what you weigh or whether you've got a passenger or not. And you've got different preload settings, so you can put it in automatic high, for example, and it'll jack the back end up and get the bike on its nose to give you a more aggressive and flickable geometry, or you can put it in automatic low, and it's still compensating for the rider and passenger weight, but it'll just sit down a bit, so it's easier to get your feet down at a stop, and also that'll slacken off the geometry and give it some more stability. A brilliant feature, in my opinion. I tested out the previous generation of this bike, but can it really be worth 20 grand? And is it that much better than these other bikes, especially when you consider the limitations of riding on the road? This thing is just bonkers. So much power, so much torque, so much performance. The handling's brilliant. There's loads of braking power, and that suspension package, you know, the ride quality is excellent, but then you've got all that versatility. You can set it up exactly how you want it, and you don't even need to get off the bike. Now look, can you realistically use it all out on the road, especially when you hit a wet patch of road under the trees like this. Absolutely not. I think the 990 Duke is way better suited to, you know, general road riding. Whereas this, you're barely scratching the surface of what it can do. But I suppose really it's a bit like owning a supercar. Of course, you can't do supercar speeds on the road, but there's that specialness. There's that knowledge that it's the best of the best in terms of performance. There's the level of spec, there's the finish, there's the presence and size and aggression of the design. This bike gets like the single-sided swing arm at the back, which just elevates it and makes it look a cut above what you get from a middleweight like the 990. It just feels so special to be around and ride, and there's this absolute effortlessness to this blistering speed. Woohoo! It's ridiculous. But look, at close to £20,000, you have to say that this is realistically a 1-star for affordability and only within budget for a relatively small proportion of riders. Obviously it's 5 stars for power though, and for me, the looks are the best of the bunch too. Thing is though, as for the fun factor, well like I say, it's a lot more serious than the 990, and you don't quite get the sensation of properly wringing its neck. So specifically for road riding, I think I'm going to go for a 4. That puts the 1390 and 990 even on 15 points total, and so if I had to call it between the two, personally I'd say the 990 is the one I'd probably go for. It's fast but not too fast, there's plenty of performance for the public road, and also I think it looks quite cool now too. As always, I'd love to know which bike you'd pick, so let me know down in the comments below. I'll also put my full review of one of the bikes that's missing from this video, the 790 Duke, on the screen now in case you haven't seen it already, so you can give it a click and give it a watch. It's great value for money and every bit as fun as these bikes. Hit subscribe as well if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle reviews like this right here on YouTube. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.